Hey, so B-roll. Some tasty B-roll. Who doesn't love some epic cinematic shots and an amazing B-roll section? Here's the thing though. So much of the magic that happens in those B-roll sections is done in the edit. So today I want to share a couple of crucial things that you can do in your edits just to add that little bit of extra magic to your B-roll or cinematic videos. I have 5 things that I want to share with you guys today, and it's really important to understand the first one really well to be able to do the remaining things in this video effectively. So the first thing that I'm going to be talking about, the first key thing, is going to be keyframes. But no, seriously, the first thing is going to be understanding keyframes and being able to use keyframes properly. If you guys already are very familiar and comfortable with keyframes, skip to the next tip and I'm sure you guys will still find some really useful information. Keyframes are, in a simple way, basically a way of controlling certain things and animating any of the effects or things that are going to be happening throughout your video. So let's do one like this to show you as something that is quite simple. And we have this audio track here, and if you wanted to change the volume of that track throughout that little clip, you can use keyframes to do that. Whenever you guys are going to want to edit your keyframes, you can select the thing you're going to wanting to be editing, and on the little effects controls, you can see these little stopwatches, these little clocks. Make sure they're highlighted, and the next thing you can look out for is this panel right here is going to be where you can edit your keyframes. So right now we have this track selected. If I wanted to change the volume of this track, I can move my scrub bar and I can add a keyframe right there. That's going to mean it's at 0 decibels. That's the standard volume. If I wanted to go lower in volume, I can move my scrub bar down to here and I could lower this. And anytime I change anything and the scrub bar is in a new place, it's going to automatically add that keyframe. I can move it down here and I can put this back to normal. It's going to automatically add that keyframe. And now what we have here is this track is going to go from normal to low back to normal. And you can watch here and you can see how it adds the keyframes in onto your actual clip as well. If you guys prefer to edit the keyframes right here, you can do so by holding Control, looking out for when it makes a little plus, and you can click add that keyframe and you can move it up and down as you please. If you are not seeing the keyframes that you would like to see on the specific clip that you are interested in manipulating, you can right click on it, say show clip keyframes, and select the ones that you would like to show. Right now, this is going to be perfect for us, and you can see when we play it here, this is going to automatically be changing. Back to normal. Boom. Here's the thing with keyframes, you can add them to almost anything that you guys are using in your videos to animate that particular thing. So for example, if I wanted to change something on this video clip right here, I could head over here. Maybe I wanted to change the opacity. I would make sure that my stopwatch is selected. That is gonna add the keyframe for it being at 100% opacity. But if I wanted it to fade out right here, I could lower this. It's gonna automatically add that keyframe and I could set it back to normal. And now, boom, that is gonna animate that. That is gonna be the first thing, and something that you guys really need to understand well to be able to do a lot of the other things that we're gonna be covering in this video. Once you guys have really mastered keyframes and been able to use them effectively, it can be an absolute game changer for your videos and the things that you can do in your edits. Spend a little bit of time with it, make sure you really grasp it, practice it, and then we can move on to the next thing that we're gonna be talking about. Now let's talk about speed ramping, and we are going to be using this keyframe method to do the speed ramping. If you're not sure what speed ramping is, it's basically a way of animating your speed to go from something like regular speed into that slow motion to accentuate something or really put emphasis on something that you want the viewer to notice with that slow motion. Or otherwise you can do a couple other really cool techniques like speed ramping out of a clip and making it go really fast, and then your next clip having it start really fast and go back to regular speed. It's a really nice transition. It's a speed ramp transition, and I'm gonna show you guys how to do that in just a second. But first, let's cover this. This clip is gonna be playing in regular speed, right? regular speed. I am gonna want to start this clip in regular speed, but I'm gonna want to slow it down to something like half speed, 50%, right around here as I come out of these like bushes and it reveals that view. That's quite cool, I think. So what I'm gonna do here is I can make sure I'm selected on this clip. I can head over to speed. I can select a keyframe. Then I can select another keyframe and I can slow down my speed. Personally, I like to edit my speed ramps on the actual clip rather than up here in the keyframe section. If you would prefer to do it here, that's no worries. It's gonna be the same thing. Once we've done that, I'm gonna find the point of my clip where I want it to start slowing down, which is right there. I'm gonna hold Control and click. That's gonna add my keyframe. Now here's the interesting part about speed ramping, is your keyframe is not just that keyframe, you can actually create a ramp with it. I'm gonna slow the second part down to, let's 44%, that's gonna be good. But now I can spread this out to make a bit of a smooth ramp, and I can make it as smooth as I would like. So instead of my clip playing normal speed and then all of a sudden just being at half speed, it's gonna have a slow transition into that half speed and it's gonna make it flow really nicely. Slow motion, okay? The next thing that we can do to make it even more of a smooth transition is if you make sure you are selected on one of these little points, you can see we have this here, and we can tweak the shape of our ramp to make it how we want. I'm gonna just make my one gradually fade like that, so it has a little bit of a roll off and then it rolls into it again. It's gonna make it even smoother. If you check this out now, slow motion, that looks really great in my opinion. Another way where you guys can use these speed ramps to make pretty cool little editing tricks is to speed ramp out of something. So let's just very quickly add a bit of a speed ramp here. I'm gonna slow this down. Let's make it really slow, something like 25%, because I filmed this in a higher frame rate. And then as we get down here, that's gonna really show that wave crashing. Instead of going back to just regular speed, which would be 100%, I'm gonna go all the way up to something like 240%. Just draw this out a little bit, and I wanna spread my ramp a little bit. I will make it a little nicer of a fade, and then we're gonna chop that off. So basically what's happening here now is it's going all the way down to that slow motion. Right at the end of the clip, it's gonna go from slow motion to really fast motion, much faster than even the original clip. And as we do that, I'm gonna start my next clip by doing the same thing and starting it with much higher speed and then going into that slower speed. I'm gonna spread this out and I'm gonna make my ramp nice. Now, if you watch this transition, it has quite a cool effect and it ramps into that next clip very quickly and almost makes quite a smooth transition that is much smoother than just having a hard cut sometimes. So let's have a watch, check it out. Pretty cool, and you guys can change how you want to do this. You could spread this out a little more to have more gradual one, or you could move the entire keyframe section. And I think that looks really cool in my opinion. Speed ramps, you can get so creative with them. Make sure you guys understand them. Really powerful tool and something very, very interesting for your B-roll and cinematic sections. Next thing we're gonna be talking about is having motion blur in your clips. Now there's this really important but often overlooked thing that happens in video footage where you have a certain amount of motion blur in your footage to make it look realistic. If something is not the correct amount of motion blur and there's no blur to it, it's gonna look jittery and it's not gonna look as nice as it could with that amount of motion blur that our eyes would see in real life. Here's the thing, if you're ever speeding up some footage, maybe you're applying one of these speed ramps, that motion blur that you would have captured originally in your camera by having the correct shutter speed is not gonna be transferred into the footage when you speed it up. So for example, on this clip where I'm running past, if we were to have a speed ramp going out of here, which I will very quickly create, as it would speed up here and we would transition into the next clip, it's not gonna have that correct amount of motion blur to give it that realistic feeling. It looks jittery and it doesn't really work. But what we can do, and I'm gonna extend this a little bit longer than I usually would if I was having that clip just do the transition. What we can do is head over to our effects panel here and we can search for directional blur. You can see it here. We can drop it onto our clip. Now, again, we are gonna need to use those keyframes to make sure that this directional blur is only gonna start to happen when we want it. So basically what we're doing is we're just faking the motion blur as I speed up. I'm gonna have that motion blur of moving and it's gonna give it that really nice feeling. Now, what we're gonna do is select where our speed ramp kind of just starts. We can head over here and we can make sure we animate both of our blur tools. Then we can start adding in our blur how we want it. So right here, it's gonna be no blur. As it speeds up, we're gonna put it about there and we're gonna start introducing some blur. We're gonna add the amount of blur and then we're gonna add the direction of the blur. So if we are gonna have it going straight sideways, it's gonna be 90 degrees because it's gonna be moving past like that. You guys are gonna have to change how you want it. Maybe your camera is whipping up or down. You're gonna have to use a different amount of degrees to fit with that. If you're struggling to figure out what it is, just put the blur length much higher. You can see it starts to stretch out like that. And then you can move it and you can see where the blur is really happening and what shape it's really turning into. We're gonna keep it at 90 and we're gonna turn it down to something around 20. I think that looks cool. And as it comes in, that blur is gonna start happening. So if you were to watch now, it has no blur here. And as it comes into our keyframes, that motion blur is gonna start to happen. Pretty cool. Makes it really feel like it's going fast rather than just having it be a jittery sped up clip. Pretty cool and really helps sell that effect, especially if you guys are gonna be doing some speed ramping transitions like we demonstrated a little while ago. If you have a direction, whip into another direction as it speeds up, it's gonna make it really fluid and it's gonna make it a really nice clean cut between those clips. Here's a really great technique to just bring a little bit more interest to one of your clips. This is something that I find myself always using if I ever shoot any solo B-roll and I have my camera locked off on a tripod and there's no movement. What we're basically gonna be doing is adding digital movement to our shots using these keyframes, and it's gonna just add another layer of movement, making that shot look a little bit more dynamic and making it a little bit more interesting. So right here you see we have this cutaway shot of these kind of cool bushes and it has a nice movement going right to left, a slow pan. What I wanna do, the shot looks awesome just the way it is, but I wanna also add in a slow zoom in. And now we don't have that caught in camera, but that's no problem. What we're gonna do is head over to our effects control panel here and we can select the stopwatch on our scale. The next thing that we are gonna do, I just wanna move this keyframe right to the beginning of my clip so that it doesn't start in the middle of the clip. I'm gonna move this down further on in our clip and I'm gonna make our clip zoomed in a little bit. Now, you have to be a little bit careful with this because as you digitally zooming in, you are losing quality of your clip. You're losing some of that resolution. In my opinion, doing something like 120 is not gonna be noticeable, especially when you guys are uploading to something like YouTube. If you film your original footage in 4K, you're gonna have a lot more resolution to work with and you can zoom in a lot more, which is a really neat trick. The next thing I'm gonna do, move this keyframe to the end of our clip because I don't want it to just end in the middle. And now if you were to watch our clip back, it will have that right to left movement as well as a slow punch in. Super cool. That might be a little bit too much of a punch in. You can use these arrows to move around to already existing keyframes. I'll hit that one to go to the end one and I'll just take it down from 119 to something like 109, be random numbers. That is looking beautiful in my opinion. And you can use this in so many different ways. If you guys are doing solo B-roll, you have that locked off tripod shot. You could even do something like this where I'll demonstrate this very quickly. But if I was to head over to this first keyframe, zoom in my shot, animate the position of my shot and move this all the way up until you see the black bar there. Move my frame along and move this all the way down. Spread this out. And now what we've done is we've added a down movement as well into that whole video. So when you guys are on a tripod or something, maybe you're walking past frame, you could zoom in and move your frame along as you're walking past and track yourself. Maybe you could have a pan up like that as you're walking off into the distance. You can get as creative as you want with this, and instead of having those shots that are just locked off on the tripod with zero movement, now all of a sudden you can have a pretty dynamic shot that was filmed with no one. You can even create some sort of handheld shake so that it looks like someone was actually holding the camera while you were there by adding multiple keyframes, maybe adding a bit of rotation, and you're gonna add in that movement like that, and it's gonna have the effect of someone being there holding that camera and filming you guys. Super powerful, and something you guys should definitely take with you into any future projects that you guys are gonna be working on. Remember guys, that these keyframes and this extremely powerful way of editing using keyframes can be used on almost any effect that you guys are gonna be dropping onto your video footage. These are just a few examples that I've shown you of things that I do quite often, but you can use them to change almost anything and use them as a way to animate almost anything in your video. It is truly an amazing tool, and it's worth spending a little bit of time getting the hang of those keyframes. I know it can be a little bit confusing and frustrating when they're not doing exactly what you want them to do, but put in the time and you will be really happy that you did. That is gonna be it for this video, guys. I hope that you found these tips useful. I hope you guys are gonna get the hang of these keyframes. If you like this video, hit like. If you wanna see more, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.